The morning light crept in pale and thin through the half-drawn blinds. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long moment, shoulders heavy from another restless night. The kettle clicked off in the next room, but I did not move right away. Everything outside already felt too loud, the same way it had felt through most of those final years of the decade. Radios and televisions pushed bright, insistent tracks at anyone who would listen. Drums snapped hard. Voices competed for space. It was music that wanted to be noticed at once. Then came a different sound. It arrived almost by accident on the Sliding Doors soundtrack, a quiet track tucked between louder cuts. Dido's voice moved like breath over water, steady and unhurried. No grand declarations, just the simple weight of someone who had already learned how to keep going. That first hearing stayed with me longer than the surrounding noise. Later, the same songs gathered into No Angel, an album that asked nothing more than to be allowed in. I stood, crossed the room, and poured the tea. Steam rose and settled against the window. On the wall above the table hung the small photograph I had placed there months earlier. It showed an ordinary street in London, nothing remarkable, yet the sight of it always loosened something tight in my chest. The day felt less sharp after I looked at it. The album played softly from the small speaker on the shelf, and for a little while, the morning belonged only to that gentle presence.
Cold, I'm wondering why I got out of bed at all. The morning rain clouds up my window, and I can't see it all.
The morning light had already begun to thin by the time I stepped outside, the kind that promised warmth but delivered only a flat chill against the skin. My head carried the dull throb of the night before, a reminder that one glass had turned into 3 without much thought. The bus pulled away just as I reached the stop, its red taillights shrinking into the traffic like a small, personal joke. I walked instead, shoes slapping against wet pavement, the weight of the day settling early in the shoulders. At work, the desk felt narrower than usual. A colleague paused by the filing cabinet and offered that familiar half-smile, the one that said my latest report had missed the mark again. No words needed. The silence between us did the work. Small defeats stacked quietly through the hours. A forgotten lunch, a train delay announced over the speaker, the low ache behind the eyes that never quite lifted. Each one arrived without fanfare, yet together they pressed down until the ordinary felt heavier than it should. Still, there was the photograph in the night before, the one above the table, and the memory of the record turning on its own. The song reached its turning point, the line that always arrived without warning. And I want to thank you. The voice held steady, no drama, just the plain fact of noticing what had carried you through. Gratitude did not arrive as a grand gesture here. It came instead in the simple act of registering another person's presence in the room, the way their quiet steadiness made the missed bus and the skeptical glance recede by a fraction. The weight did not vanish, yet it shifted enough to let the next breath come easier. By evening, the city had softened again. I stood at the window and watched the streetlights blink on one by one, each small illumination marking nothing more than survival through another set of ordinary hours. The album had ended, but the lines stayed, turning the day's small defeats into something that could be held without apology. The line lingered through the quiet hours that followed, refusing to settle into memory the way most songs do. Years later, the drum break from the original recording found its way into other tracks, stripped of its gentle surroundings and set to harder rhythms that still carried a trace of the first restraint. That borrowed pulse traveled further than anyone expected, turning up in places that seemed far removed from the room where the words were first sung. One of those places was the chorus of Eminem's Stan, where the same measured thanks became the voice on the answering machine, a quiet counterpoint to the storm building around it. Listeners who had known the song only in passing suddenly heard it again, now threaded through a story of obsession and silence. The contrast made the gratitude sound even smaller, yet somehow more durable, as if the words could absorb whatever weight was placed on them without breaking. Some still hear the thanks directed at a single person, a private gesture of relief after a difficult stretch. Others read the line as something wider, offered to the simple fact of making it through another day or to the larger mercy that allows small mercies at all. The ambiguity has never been settled because the delivery gives no extra clue, only the steady warmth that refuses to dramatize itself. That same warmth is what keeps the track returning in unexpected moments. It does not push or plead. It simply registers that survival has occurred and leaves room for the listener to decide what, exactly, deserves the thanks. In a world that favors louder declarations, the choice to stay measured continues to matter. Why does that restrained warmth still feel necessary now?